legitimacy and complaint. Oh,
Oh,
okay.
there it is.
Boop, boop, boop,
So
boop.
it sounds like the topic is kind of distinguishing what real excuses from fake excuses, if you boil it down, in addiction treatment of like why it's not working for someone, correct? Is that like an accurate way to state it?
Yeah, I would say discernment being a big word there, being able to discern like the legitimacy of somebody's complaints versus if it's the addiction, if you will, like making excuses and manipulating to get back to the freedom needed for substance use. So yeah, 1-star reviews, finding the truth. Here we go.
That's I've got to remember to put that as the title to this podcast.
Finding the truth. And which we'll get into it, but there is like a really important aspect there of like personal integrity, you know, like organizational integrity of like hearing people's complaints and trying to make adjustments versus just being like, hey, this is more of like a personal deflection of like the discomfort you have and blaming other people instead of taking accountability. So
well, it's also you're not really hearing a normal person's complaints. It's not like somebody who's showed up to work with good job performance and now you're listening to their complaints. This is someone who has a history of misleading you, manipulating you, not living an honest lifestyle. They're coming out of a lifestyle of addiction. So it can be tough to hear things and trust that what you're hearing is accurate.
Yeah, for sure. And you don't want to like minimize that, right? You don't want to minimize like their perspective and their voice and make them feel even smaller or marginalized than they already do in their own head. But also, yeah, you're talking about somebody who is in like a dopamine crash and a dopamine deficiency and desperately, completely irrationally wanting to get back to something that is poisoning them and helping them feel a way that feels comfortable, but it's making everybody around them, including themselves, wildly unhealthy, you know? So yeah, how do we want to get into this? Do we want to talk about like situations? Do we want to talk about personal stories that we have maybe done some pretty wild excuse making? Do we want to talk about a time like where we looked at ourselves and we're like, hey, that's something I got to do better as a therapist, as a program manager, as a sober living coach, whatever. What do we want to do? Where do we want to start today, boys?
Go ahead, Lucas. You were gearing up.
I was just thinking I could start personal.
Okay.
To start there. That's like as far back as I could go if we want to keep it chronological.
Mm-hmm.
But I and just in a general sense, I mean, there's so many specific examples, and I don't mean to project this onto the guys and the people that we work with just because I did it, but you do see so many of these trends when you do have personal recovery experience and hanging out with other addicts, alcoholics, and need recovery, and then go into treatment and sober living with people and seeing all the stuff there. I mean, you do build a wealth of experience, and then working in it, I always tell people I pretty much miss anything I missed. I gain anything I missed in my personal story working with the guys that we work with. But the manipulation, the like misdirection, I think is what a lot of it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was thinking about, all right, some big meltdown happens. It would always happen every like 3 or 6 months, a legal charge, an overdose, something like that. And my parents say like, okay, you need to go to treatment. And then they would go, I'd say, all right, well, you have to figure out the treatment. And then they would go and they do all this research and look into it. And no matter what they found, I would look into it and then just pick it apart and like look on the website and be like, oh, they do group therapy, but it doesn't say it's with trained clinicians, or it doesn't say licensed, or like I would just look for any little word I could to laser in on. And then once I finally got down to it, then I would switch it to like, okay, it sounds like I'll have to find my treatment. And the whole point of all this is just like kicking the can down the road to me, because I'm just thinking the more time that goes by if like I can get a month to go by before we find some kind of treatment, and in that month things are pretty normal, then I have the argument of like, hey, I mean, really, we're going to do treatment? Like, it's been a month now, everything's been fine. I mean, I kind of have proven that like my way's working. You know, do we really need to go do this? And then that kind of weakens them to some extent, where they're like, man, do we need to do this? It has been a month and things have been kind of fine. And just always finding that way to not have to go to the place that I knew was going to actually force me to get sober, and trying to find a way around it. But I would make all these excuses of the trainings of the staff and the legitimacy and the licensure and where it's located and what their daily group schedule is and if drama therapy was involved and, you know, whatever the thing may be. So just a lot of personal experience with that.
Don't forget the food.
The food. Yeah, I started I can't believe I'm missing this one. All right, real quick. When I was in wilderness treatment, I started like basically a coup amongst my wilderness treatment group against the staff. And they would give us weekly these like basically complaint forms. And we like banded together and filled, I mean, it was like 4 lines, but we filled up those 4 lines, then wrote in all the white space around the questions on the front page, and then the entire back page, and then signed it like it was the Constitution, the whole group of us. And it was about sock thickness, warmth, cold, food, the amount we had to hike, you know, if there was like any humanity left in us after we were like stripped of all these things. It was everything, and it was insane. And it ended up that funny enough, the treatment center did the tried and true. They took us, and maybe not always specifically this, but like something cool. So the CEO took us mountain biking the next day in DuPont State Forest, which is like some of the best mountain biking in the country. It just happened to be we were right by there. And so we went mountain biking. And I remember before we went, I was like, guys, we're going to go down on these mountain bikes, but don't let this like buy us. Okay. When we get to the bottom, we're still sticking with our guns and like, we're not giving up on this. And we got to the bottom where I think another staff literally had a backpack filled with candy. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, and started passing out candy. And we're in wilderness treatment. So like we're eating pepperoni sticks and like tortillas, and we haven't had candy in months. And everyone starts eating candy, and it was like, so I heard you guys like had complaints, and everyone's just kind of like, no, I mean, we're all good. We could just head back and everything's all good. I'm like, oh, you cowards. And so a bunch of people kind of slipped off, and then a bunch of people in my group ended up leaving over it. And the guilt I feel, you know, today and afterwards over like having a part in kicking up this dust storm were people who had issues left treatment. But the reality is everyone who left immediately left to get messed up. They didn't leave to go get thicker socks or better food or anything like that. They banded together every nickel and dime they had to go find the first dealer or liquor store they could and get messed up. And so I think that's kind of what's at the heart of it most times. But that's what we're talking about today, is the nuances of real issues and people having real stuff going on that is hard and they need help through, or maybe we can adjust, versus the kind of BS stuff that's just misdirection.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's stories.
That's what I was waiting for. You were like beating around the bush.
Dude, I forgot about that story. That's like the best story for this.
Yeah, we wanted the personal thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what's also interesting about it too. Like from the treatment side, which is like the side I've always been involved with, is like making sure you're hearing people's complaints and trying to improve, and also trying to figure out like how to catch somebody before they do make that like really detrimental action of like relapsing. Because we can always like, you can Monday morning quarterback it. You can look back and say like, oh, these guys were just like kicking up all this dust storm because they wanted to go get messed up. But it'd be nice to know that beforehand and really speak to it. So I think there's a few things. One is like always like staying humble, like as a treatment provider, and realizing that you can always be improving, and then not dismissing any complaints you receive. But alongside that, like explaining the reason for why you do things, you know, because it's probably born out of like a real belief in like this would help people. So this is why we go hiking, or this is why we go to the gym on this day, or this is why we cook at the house. Like, this is why we do these things you're complaining about. And if something just still doesn't make sense logically, like, at least that for me, like, if something still just doesn't make sense, I'm like, that's probably like the addiction. Like, that's probably addiction. And that just takes like years to hone that in, I think, for somebody who maybe doesn't personally struggle with addiction or is on the treatment center side of it,
Well, get interested, ask questions.
Yeah.
Like, most of the time I find that just a conversation can expose a lot of this stuff. And yeah, I do have a motive. I'm not going to act like I'm just purely interested and I'm not skeptical at all. But I'm just like, oh, so like if we fix this thing, then everything would be good. And they're like, well, no, because then it would be this thing. And you're like, oh, and if we fix that, and then they bring up something that contradicts the first thing. And I'm like, but I thought we just said like 2 points ago, this was the problem. Now you're saying that it should be the other way. Like, I think if you just kind of have that conversation out, a lot of this stuff gets exposed. And when it's legit stuff, I find I don't have as much of that feeling, and I can kind of give them the benefit of the doubt. Last thing I was going to say was the like targeted nature of the complaints too. And so I knew that if I hit my mom with the like, they're not feeding me, they're being mean to me. This guy said this to me, and he said it in this really gruff tone and just told me I needed to grow the F up and blah, blah, blah. Like, my mom was going to kind of buckle on that. And then to my dad was like, you're just paying for us to like, skip around in the woods and do art therapy, which is just like finger painting on a stump. And like, there's no real treatment to this at all. And then my dad, like the money side, like, what am I paying for would be more what hit. And that's going to be different for different parents, like what's for them. But I knew my parents and what buttons to press to get the biggest reaction out of them. And for it needed to not be because I wanted to go get high, because then like they would come pick me up if it was just for me to go get high, then they'd be like, all right, man, you're on your own, you just don't want to get sober. But if I could make it all this other stuff, they might pick me up. I could go back and live with them. They get me a hotel room for the night. And a lot of times that's what it was. It's like, I want you to pay for my life, pay for my drugs and alcohol, subsidize my addiction, and also stay the hell out of it.
Yeah. I kind of want to go through like and come up with like some of the common ones we hear, like food, having to cook, having to clean, therapist not personally being in recovery, or therapist personally being in recovery. It goes both ways.
Yeah.
It's like, what? This person, well, they were an addict too. How could I listen to them, listen to the mistakes they made? Or the flip side of it, what? They were never an addict. How could I listen to them? They don't get me. It's like, oh man, which one is it? Like,
I had a young guy one time that said he had just gotten dropped off that day. It was maybe hours later, and we were talking, and he was like, so what, like, what's your deal? What's your story? And I was like, oh, I'm this many years in recovery. My main thing was opiates. Like what? And I was like heroin. And then I heard him like 15 minutes later talking to his dad in the bedroom, unbeknownst that, and I'm not trying to snoop on him, but he's like talking pretty loud for wanting to be secretive. But he was like, Dad, you wouldn't believe it. That guy, Lucas, you dropped me off with, he used to do heroin. Like, his dad was going to be freaked out and come pick him up. Like, man, that's the point, dude. Yeah. Of course I did. Like, that's why you're here, is because I used to do heroin and now I don't. And I figured out how to stop doing that. Like, you think that that's a knock that gives me more credibility. And this is the only world in which doing heroin gives you more credibility. But here we are.
Yeah. And the reality is like, even on our team, like, it's a combination of people who are personally sober and then who are not like sober. So it's like, which one is it? So you can have a guy, and like we've had this like recently the past week. He's like, well, I'm not going to listen to you if you're not in recovery. Like I was said to one of our therapists. I'm like, oh, perfect. Well, you can talk to this coach, this program director, the COO. They are all personally in recovery, and you can go talk to them, enjoy. I'm just go play video games, like.
Well, and I like to like sub people in and just call that stuff out. Like,
yeah.
Hey, all right. Well, then talk to me if you want to talk to someone in recovery. And then he's got some excuse with me. Okay, then talk to this guy. Yeah. And he's got something with that guy. And I feel like when you build up, I like to build up the case for like, hey, we did 10 different things trying to like solve your problem and have you just hear it from the right person. What is the common denominator, dude? It's you. 10 different people, as you had all these nitpicky excuses and stuff like that. and then you still just couldn't do this one hard thing, which is like get a job or have a conversation with your parents or something that most of the world would agree, like, I think that's a pretty objectively good thing to do in life. It's not like a GT thing. Like we're having people do weird stuff. We're just like, hey, like be an adult, be responsible, be a good person, do the next right thing. Like, no, I actually can't do the next right thing because you're not an addict. It's like, man, what are we talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And I want to come back to the curiosity thing because I do think that's super important, you know, of like to be legit curious, not to poke holes in someone's argument, but just to be really curious about their story and how they see things, and you know, so they can be heard, but also kind of being able to build that rapport and be like, hey, I'm trying to save you from yourself. You know what I mean? You're here for a reason, and let me like help you not keep making the same mistakes. The other thing that just triggered in my mind was if the precursor to a complaint is increasing accountability and responsibility, there's a good chance that that's like addiction. So it's like if we're working out some kind of formula there, hey, accountability or responsibility has just increased, and then plus a complaint equals addiction, like manipulation. Like, and I'm not saying that's always the case, but in my experience, it is. If I have to, you know, take responsibility for my feelings and not being able to just numb out everything because I'm in treatment now and I'm starting to complain, that's addiction. If I'm complaining about I have to get a job or actually studying in school, so increase responsibility, and my complaints go up, it's addiction. So like that's kind of like a little like cheat sheet, I think, for parents who can hopefully stay objective, which I know is really hard, but to stay objective and pull back, like, okay, our son or our loved one is complaining right now. Is there any increased responsibility that just occurred? And if there is, it's a good chance that's probably like addiction trying to manipulate it. You know?
That's a good cheat sheet for
it. Cheat sheet.
I was thinking the most like extreme example too of like what's something that just we cannot falter on at all, that if someone is complaining about, but that we might still have some not hesitations, but suspicions it might not be true, and that we personally work with. And I find that that's like depression and suicidal ideation. It's something that we have to take like super, super serious, no matter what we feel in our gut about it. You have to deal with it appropriately, you know, and like make sure you do everything exactly by the book and get them the help they need. But there's been a lot of those cases where on the back end, then they even admit like, oh, I just said that because I wanted to leave. Yes. And you're just like, oh, dude, we called like in like emergency psych people from like the city to like have you committed. Yeah. You had to go to a psych ward for a week. You did all that just to get out of here and like waste all these people's time. And then on the other end, we've had it to where it is very serious and like it was true and they really were in a deep, dark spot. And that's why you have to take it serious no matter what. But I feel like that's the most severe situation that like got to no matter what. And then everything is kind of downhill from there with all the other examples as far as how serious you have to take it and how much you can press in or kind of have healthy doubt about it and express that.
Yeah, I was that guy.
You were. Dave's got personal stories on that.
Yeah. I mean, I was the one went to treatment. I went to a horse ranch, so it was like everyone gets to take care of a horse, and which sounded great on the front end. And mind you, I'm the one that went to my parents asking for help. My mom, my dad had just passed away, but I went to my mom crying, and I was like, I've got to go get help. I'm gonna have to. And I knew that I couldn't do it there. We had tried all of these different solutions while living in my hometown of like Suboxone, methadone, church, like going to work every day. That'll fix this. So I knew that I was going to have to go away. But as soon as I got there, the excuses started flowing of like, I used the excuse that you just mentioned to Lucas of like, these people are more sick than I am. Like, I'm not what they are. These are like hardcore addicts that are injecting drugs every single day. Like, I'm not that. Like I just weaned off of opiates using methadone. Like I'm just taking methadone, you know, like I had all of those arguments. Then it was the food. Then it was the, like, I went the financial route of like, you're just paying them for me to do their work. Like I'm cleaning horse stalls, I'm brushing their horses every day, like rebuilding fences, the fences that have fallen down around the property. What are we talking about? So with that route, and then when all of those were failing and my mom just wasn't having it, she would always, her ace card that she would play was she would say, David, I just lost your dad. I don't want to lose you too. Like we're sticking this out. And it would be like, damn, okay, I'll stay one more night. But eventually my what I thought was the trump card was I'm going to kill myself. And at first it started with just that. I'm going to kill myself if you don't come get me. And of course they start calling the therapist to come meet with me right away, you know, emergency services on standby, like let's get ready to take him to the psych ward if we need to. And that didn't work with my mom. So 2 days later, I get another phone call and I ramped it up and I said, not only am I going to kill myself, but I'm going to hang myself with the horse hardware, like from the barn. Like I tried to get really descriptive with it and create an image in her mind. And that's how manipulative I was being. Was like, maybe if I can make it real enough that she can picture it, she'll come get me. So yeah, I was the guy that went that far to get out of it. But another thing I want to bring up is that, like, I don't know how aware I was that I was doing it to go get high. It's almost like being thrown in a fire, and the only thing you're worried about is getting out of the fire. It's not which amusement park I'm going to go visit once I'm out of this fire. So, like, the thing was, is I was in treatment and I was in pain because I was missing my solution, or, you know, my solutions were drugs and alcohol. That's what made me better. I was missing that. So I'm in pain. All I want to do is get out of pain. I just want to get out of here. And that's all I'm focused on. It wasn't, I didn't go, I think we've talked about this before, but I didn't go as far to say, like, and I'm going to go get some methadone as soon as I get out of here, or I'm going to find the first person that maybe even has marijuana to just alter my state of mind. It was just get me out of here with no attention or regard, like, what is this doing to my mom? You know, it wasn't until 2 years later that I heard that she's like crying herself to sleep every night, if she is sleeping, and like having to be medicated because of what I'm putting her through. But like, I can't go there, you know, when I'm in that much pain. Like, I'm so selfish and self-seeking, and I just want to be out of this miserable place that, like, I'm not worried about the therapist that you're calling, the psych ward that you're lining up, my mom's emotions at night, or her not being able to sleep. Like, and I just like for all parents to hear that, because I know it can feel like a personal attack at times of how dare they, and even to us, like, how dare they act like this? They're wasting my time. We can easily forget how bad it was, the emotions that wrap into it. I just wanted to mention that.
That's well said. Yeah. And the suicidal thing is like super serious, right? Like, in this, we may need to put a disclaimer on this, that this could be like a triggering conversation, because like we know people who have actually like died from suicide, you know, like that is like a real thing. We fortunately know many more people who have like threatened it, and it was more of like a function of like the addiction, and it never went through, you know, like a line was held or they received help, even if it wasn't even the help they really wanted. Like, to your point, Lucas, of like going to the psych ward, and then it turns out later it's like I wasn't really going to do it. I was just trying to get out of this pain. But it still can be like really scary, you know. And when I think about people who have actually like attempted suicide, like for the most part, they weren't really advertising it. Like, they weren't really advertising it. And that's not to say, like, I just want to be clear, like, that's not to say that's the case every time. And it is something that we do take very serious. We have had situations where guys have like threatened it, and we have like taken all the steps, like the emergency services or getting somebody to the psych ward to know not a threat to themselves. We do that. We have to do that. Like, that's part of like providing good care. But the reality is, along with that, like most people I know who have either attempted or been successfully completing it, like it was like kind of out of the blue. It's like when you look back at it, you're like, there were like maybe little signs, but there weren't really big signs. They were not like threatening it the way I've heard it before, when somebody's just trying to get out of the discomfort, you know. At least that's been my experience.
Well, think about the weird like analogy, or I don't know what it would be, but something similar. when you're thinking about people who kill themselves with drugs, because we've known people to do that, they don't say that. You know, like any people I know that have died of overdoses didn't threaten that to anyone. Or there's probably a couple exceptions there, but I would say 99% of the people I've known to die of drug overdoses did it in secret, silence, when everyone was asleep, tiptoed around, you know, and then this thing that ended up killing them. And I think that they knew on some level could kill them, but they didn't intend for it to. But just that level of seriousness around it, I think normally has that level of secrecy around it if it's something you're really determined to do, versus kind of like the big public threats. Again, not that they can't be real, and certainly not that we wouldn't take them as real, but I find that more often those are the ones that later, by their own admission, not my admission, their admission, are like, I was just trying to get out of this or that, or I thought whatever. Which I do have to add is kind of funny, only because they're not serious, because a lot of them, when I talk to them in the psych ward, they're like, this place sucks way more than GT. I can't have a phone here. They got nothing going on. And I was like, yeah, dude, and you did all that because you didn't want to get a job. Like, you'd rather be working a job with your phone at GT, driving your car, having freedom, like, you know, living at the GT house. Now you're in like a psych ward with no shoelaces and drawstrings, and you didn't even want to kill yourself. And you're in there with a bunch of people who, like, you know, do want to kill themselves and have serious issues. I'm just like, man, you messed up so bad, dude. Like, not only with wasting everyone's time and energy, but yeah, also you just kind of shot yourself in the foot, because now you're in, and then 3 days later, they're like, I want to go back to GT. And the psych team's like, nah, dude, we got to hold you. Like, you said some pretty serious stuff. And then they realize they can't undo it, to be like, no, I was just joking. Or like, I didn't mean it. I just wanted to get out of this. They're like, sorry, bud, this is the way it goes. You're locked up here now for 7 days.
Yeah. I can think of two. I can think of, like, we've seen it on both sides of it. I can think of one guy that's like, been through the program, and so his complaints were pretty significant about like being depressed and suicidal, but he also like took responsibility. So his complaints were not because his responsibility went up. His complaints were something different. And he took big responsibility in trying to improve his like mental health and his depression and his like suicidal ideation. So that was a good example. It did not fit into that formula of like increased responsibility plus complaining equals addiction. It didn't fit into that formula, right? There's something different. And he worked through it, and like addiction turned out to not be the issue. It's more like his mental health issues. He was really like convinced on addiction, and like did end up doing very well because he like worked on that, right? But then I can think of numerous guys who have like the responsibility went up, the complaining went up, and it turns out it was just a function of addiction. And we find that out later because they would say, admit to, hey, I was just trying to get out of this. I just wanted my parents to bail me out, give me an apartment, whatever. Or once they do finish, you know, or they can maybe come back, or they get more freedom, then they go back to using relatively quickly. So it's like, in hindsight, you're looking back at it, I mean, they were just trying to get back to this like feeling they think they need to get, or to escape this like pain of responsibility and ownership, you know? So I don't know, it's really interesting. And it's like, it's a tough part of the job, you know, it's a tough part of the job for me, because like I have like people I care about who have like either attempted suicide or have completed suicide or have overdosed. So when that comes up, there's always like a bit of this own like fear within yourself, because you care about this person. Even, you know, whether it's your kid from a parent perspective, or for like one of your clients, like you really care about them, you're really worried, and then trying to get into your logical mind of like, what is going on? Let me discern this. It's like one of the hardest parts of the job, like one of the absolute hardest parts of the job. And, you know, it's one that you really got to be locked in on to make the right call, you know. And I don't think you can do that in a vacuum. We always like escalate that up from a treatment team perspective, talk it out like with multiple people and with the parents of like, what do we need to do in this scenario? You know, can't make those decisions on your own.
We've even had parents that are just like, he's lying.
Don't
do anything about it. And we're still like, we got to. We have to do something about it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They're like, he's done this 1,000 times. He's never telling the truth, you know, and like they kind of know, because they know their son, you know, of like, he's done this so many times. So even in those situations, it's tough that it's like, you kind of, once the person says it, like the ball's rolling, and it rolls in one direction.
That makes you think of one situation from several years ago where it was that exact scenario where like we have to call it because of what he's saying. Just in case, even if we suspect it's not true, just in case it is, like we need to take this step. But also secondarily, like this is like a natural consequence. If you go around saying these things, you need to have the consequences of it to learn from it. So do not rob that person of that opportunity to learn this. You know, if like going to the psych ward, which seems like this fantasy realm or something, turns out it's not what you thought it was, like you need to experience that to learn what it is, to have empathy for the people in there and realize like that is just not a viable like threat or a viable way to get what I want. So I need to learn from that, you know? And that's an expensive like lesson to learn, but it is a lesson to be learned for some people.
I agree. And we've had a guy in the past that had really serious depression issues, and he would have done anything that we said. And he did do anything that we said, you know, as far as like, hey, like exercise can help. He like would be working out like a demon in the gym for 45 minutes. And if I told him to stand on his head for an hour a day, he would have been doing that. I obviously didn't, but I mean, he would have just done anything. And he was so determined to not feel the way that he felt. He really didn't want to be like that, and is doing awesome today. I mean, probably half a decade of sobriety and married, house, great job, like everything you could ever want. I don't think he's got those same issues going on, but at that point in his life, he did. And he would have just done anything. Versus a lot of the guys I think we work with, like literally won't lift a finger. And sometimes that's the tough part. Like that can be a byproduct of depression, is that you have no motivation, total apathy, nothing's worth it, very nihilistic, nothing even matters. So it's just tough to go on that alone, to be like, well, if you're not willing to do anything, it's not real, because we know that's the truth.
Did you get to that place, Lucas, where you were just like at some point in your journey, like a switch flipped and you were like, all right, I'm going to do everything that they're telling me to do?
Let's not get crazy and call it a switch flipped. That sounds kind of binary, black and white. I live more in the gray. No, yeah, probably not a switch flip. Let's say like, you know, there's a book that talks about like, you know, spiritual experiences, and there's one major example where they say it's like a burning bush. And then luckily in the back of that book, they talk about like the educational variety of a spiritual experience where it's gradually and slowly. I definitely had the gradual, slow thing. The closest thing I could say to that was I remember being about 6 months sober in the sober living that you were managing, David, and saying
it was something that I said. I just spit some knowledge and you were like, gosh, I need to do exactly what
actually, it was something you said, and I was like, I'll do anything to not be that guy. Get that guy away from me. No. And I don't think it had anything to do with staff. And I had great staff around me. I mean, it was you, it was Zach, it was Will. It was like really good role models for the first time in my life of guys who were sober that were like around my age and were doing the deal and had lives that I wanted. But I remember just being somewhere around that 6 month mark and thinking like, I'm this far in, I might as well just see it through. And I don't know that a switch flipped and that I was like, I'm going to call my sponsor every day and do step work and get a job and do this and that. But I like had maybe some switch flipped, at least towards just being sober. I don't know that I fully bought into recovery and accountability and all that stuff, but something flipped. It was just like, I'm this deep in, I might as well see it through.
Yeah.
So not as sexy as the switch flipping, the lever pulling, but
yeah. I wouldn't say that a switch flipped for me, but I do remember getting to a place and it was out of resentment where I was like, and I'd already tried all of these things to get out of
them.
Yeah. It was like, I'll show them. Like, I will do exactly what you tell me to do. I'm going to do all this step work stuff. I'm going to go to these meetings you're telling me to go to, these appointments you're telling me to go to, and I'm going to stick it to you. I'm going to do all of it just to show you that your way will not work for me and that I need to get out of here. And
did people tell you weren't going to make it? Is that why you did that?
I don't know.
People only told me that they thought I wasn't going to make it after I made it. So that probably helped with avoiding anything of like, I'll show you. I don't even know that would have been my response. But like you and Zach and Will and other people I knew when I was getting sober were like, If we are betting guys, you are not a guy we were betting on that would get sober, let alone stay sober.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that I'm wrong all the time on that too. And that's where it's like, that is just a little side bet that I give no credit to in my head because I'm almost always wrong. And there are guys that really struggle and are really tough that are sober to this day, and guys that were super easy along the way that seem like they just got everything that, you know, are not sober. And it was kind of all BS. So I try to just hold that very loosely these days.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to like the discernment thing we're talking about, like figuring out the legitimacy of somebody's complaints. Like if we can't even discern like who's going to be successful or not, like that's probably where curiosity is more of like the answer, of just staying in the present. Because I agree, like my bets are not great on that. You know, my odds of winning are not good on that either. There's been guys that I thought for sure really had it, and unfortunately went back out and like had great struggles. And then there's been guys where I'm like, I don't know about that. I could see that falling apart really quick, and then they're still sober today. So I don't know. You can get kind of nihilistic with it and be like, nobody's going to get sober. And that's not true. You're like, so there isn't real, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
Besides just maybe be curious and like humble. Like, I don't really know, but I think this could work. You know,
That's what it is. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I'm just going to do what makes the most sense in the moment. And there's a quote, I've probably already read it in here before, but I just shared it with a parent this past week around boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, go to my text messages with them. So it's just because it hurts doesn't mean it's wrong. And just because it's right doesn't mean it's without risk. And so it's just like the best thing that I know to do in the situation, knowing that it's just the best thing to do, but there's no guarantees. And we work with, basically our jobs are, we have to almost exclusively take what they tell us as like the motivation to do the next thing. I'm like, okay, they're saying they're depressed, so we're going to do this and we're going to do that and we're going to work on this thing and whatever. But then we also work with a demographic that can be very dishonest, manipulative, you know, a lot of misdirection, stuff like that. And some of that kind of subconsciously, where they're not even like mastermind, like sitting behind a desk planning all this stuff out. It's just like reactive. And they're just like, I'll just say this lie. And then I got out of it in that moment. And I didn't think about it another time past that. So that's what makes it really tough. It's like all just kind of on what they say. And I have to, what I'm trying to discern is if there's any difference between what they say and what they actually believe. And that's what makes it tough. Because a lot of times, yeah, they're saying this, but the truth is something different. And I'm trying to get that truth out of their mouth, kind of trick it out of them to, or get enough rapport to where they can be honest about it, or go through enough of their excuses to where that's the only thing left is to just say the truth. But it's like all these kind of like games and tricks to be played to just try to get that truth out.
Why do you think it's so vital to get that truth out?
Because that's the real issue. Like once you really say like, dude, it's not the food, it's not y'all, I just really want to get high. And I'm really, or like even more than that, I'm really scared to be sober. I am really scared of real life without drugs and alcohol. But like that last part, I don't even know that they know that, like at all. Because the main thought in their head is just, I got to get high, I got to get high, I got to get high. So I don't even think they know. And that's where you're trying to even like teach like the language and the empathy and the vulnerability to even be able to know how to say something like that, let alone then like the courage to say it. Because that's really putting all your cards on the table. Because now a week later, when they're like, no, I take it back, it really is the socks and it is the food. It's like, now, did you kind of already told on yourself? Like, the cat's out of the bag. We know. So that's what's important to come out, the real truth. But that's like the most vulnerable thing a person could do in addiction, is to put all those cards on the table.
Mm-hmm.
It is literally an intense game of poker. People keeping cards close to their chest, not putting them on the table, calling bluffs.
It's not even just poker though. It's like you're playing two different games. It's like
Yeah.
it's like y'all are both sitting at a table and it's like y'all playing blackjack, but they think it's like 5-card stud or something. And like, man, we're playing like, wait, hang on. You do know this is the game we're playing right now. I think there's also like, there's some real power in admitting it to yourself. Like you hear yourself saying it and it kind of loses some of its like
potency.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's really easy to convince yourself of something, you know, and then when you hear yourself say it or you write it down or whatever, and you're like, you get a little bit of the ick, you know, you give yourself the ick with what you like think and believe. We all do this, by the way, addict or not. Like where it's really fun to like blame whoever about whatever. And then when we say it out loud, we're like, oh, like that's not exactly rational, you know, like that's not exactly what I believe. So I do think that's why it's really, I agree. I think it's really important to get to the truth of it and just say it what it is, because also you're being transparent. Like you're practicing like principles of recovery and being vulnerable and transparent, even when you're saying you want to go get messed up. So even if you do take that and you still go get messed up, you know, kind of the joke's on you. Like, hey, you did it in an honest way. Maybe that's going to lead to like more honesty in your future, hopefully, you know, and hopefully will like lead you more to a path that's like in line with your values.
Well, and we've had guys before too that like would say every day in the program, I want to get high.
Yeah.
I just want to get high. I just want to get high.
Yes.
Then it's like trying to dig into the other stuff, you know, of like, why is it that you want to get high?
Yeah.
What is so fearful about recovery and like what we're doing here? Why is this like oil and water to you? And when we talk about this stuff, that your reaction is, I just got to get high. And not saying I don't understand it and I don't empathize with it and I haven't experienced it, but just why? Like that's kind of the question, is why?
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny. I had something with I always got, you know, stuff going on with family, and the quote was something around like, is it mental health stuff or is it addiction? And the person I was talking to mentioned like the cart or the horse, and I was saying that, you know, at the point in time that the cart and the horse slam into the barn, it doesn't really matter who got there first. We got to get the horse and the cart at the same time and start picking them up and getting them back to their feet and doing whatever. And so I just say that for that kind of underlying reason for a lot of people, that is mental health stuff. It's anxiety, it's depression. And that was probably there before the addiction. And then they use the addiction to make that better. But in turn, it actually made it worse to where now the initial problem is worse. The original solution is now probably the worst problem of everything. And you got to deal with all these problems now because we were using bad solutions. And so it's just a lot to unpack, but it's interesting where some people want to just point it towards, no, it's just my mental health. I don't have addiction issues. And even our line is just like, addiction is a mental health issue, because like definitively, factually, it is.
So like best we understand it right now is we use this book right here, the DSM-5. All right. Created by people way smarter than me. There will be a new edition at some point. The word addiction is not necessarily in this book. Substance abuse and substance dependency is the fancy word they use for it. Now you will find all kind of good stuff in this. You will find, let's see, anorexia. You will find premature ejaculation. Now with the next one. Okay, sorry, I'm just flipping pages here. Just see alcohol use disorder. What's the next one? Schizoid personality disorder. You'll find all kind of things like bipolar, all the anxiety, depression is all here. As is substance dependency disorder. It's the same. It is the same. And anytime I hear somebody saying that, at least in my field, it's because they don't want to get sober and they want to make it something other than the fact that they have a problem with substances.
Even the amount of parents that say that.
Yes.
I want to know. And I will say too, our industry doesn't do a great job of combining the two. They make very clear indications of like, this is a substance use facility and this is a mental health facility, and they can't bill for mental health items. They can only bill for substance use items. Like, you know, we tried to, I don't know how much I brought y'all in the loop of this, but trying to get a mental health license as well with Greenville Transitions. And it was like, no, you can't in the state unless you're a hospital, pretty much. They were like, in South Carolina, we're not going to let you become a mental health facility unless you are like follow all the guidelines of a hospital, like 24/7 medical staff, all the rules and regulations that your top tier hospitals would have. We would have to abide by that, which you can't. Like, we couldn't do that with as small of a facility as we are.
Mm-hmm.
But even that right there is like so frustrating to me, because it alludes to the fact that, like, oh, substance use is different from mental health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I was first coming into the field, and was in grad school, my supervisor, shout out Amber Hollingsworth, check out our podcast. I don't even know what's the podcast, David. Check out our podcast.
Put the shovel down, dude.
Put the shovel down. Yeah. She told me, she was like, hey, like, this is like a great field to go into, because you're going to see it all. Like, if you can do this, work with addiction, you can be a really good therapist, because you're going to see anxiety, you're going to see bipolar, you're going to see couples issues, you're going to see sexual related issues, you're going to see personality disorder, you're going to see all that within this field of substance abuse. So, like, buckle up, and if you really want to do this thing, being a therapist, you're going to see it all here. And I was like, all right, come on, let's do this. I had never really planned to be like a substance abuse counselor, but had just kind of fell into it. And she's right. Like, you do see all of that. We see that all the time in our guides. The amount of times we spend in our treatment teams talking about the actual substances, or the amount of times we spend talking about the actual substances in our groups and therapy, is very rare. It's always the underlying stuff, which would fall into the category of mental illness or mental health issues, right? But for the love of all that is good, like, they are not separate things. Okay. They are one and the same. They are the cart and the horse. They are the same entity that is slammed into the barn and created a chain of reactions that's a hot mess express. So don't pick and choose, please.
Who put that barn there?
Who put that barn there? That's not where I left my barn. I think I don't think every mental health facility has to be able to work with addiction, but I think every addiction facility has to be able to work with mental health.
100%, dude. 100%.
If they're gonna be effective and do well, I think you've got to be able to treat what is the underlying issue, which for most people is normally mental health stuff. And we occasionally get those people that are like, no, not anxious, not depressed, just tried drugs and really loved it. Mm-hmm. No trauma, family's good. Like, that, we get that stuff sometimes, but I feel like that's very, very few and far between. And most times there's something, anxiety, depression on the lesser side, like more severe, like bipolar, personality disorder, trauma, abuse, sexual stuff, couples problem, like everything you said, parental problems.
I can't think of a guy that I've worked with that hasn't had something going on, even if it's just as like quote unquote basic. It's just like really chronic conflict avoidance.
Yeah,
which is a function of anxiety. Like,
that's true.
I have yet to meet anybody who doesn't have something. And once again, maybe doing the drugs and alcohol created that problem or caused it to get worse. But once again, it's chicken or the egg. I don't really care. I don't care. Like, we just got to get to the root of what's going on here and start working on that, or you will go back to the substances. That's just the reality of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So it's interesting when that stuff comes up of like, I got mental health stuff. It's like, I agree. This isn't the card that you think you're playing. Because like, yeah, I totally agree. You have mental health stuff, one of which is addiction. The other stuff I really want to talk about too. Don't think we're about to refer you somewhere else because we're not equipped to deal with that.
Right.
We're not only equipped for it, we're expecting it.
Yes.
With every guy at every turn, there to be some mental health issue going on.
Yep, for sure.
Cool. Anything else that we want to throw in here?
Oh, how about this? In the interest of like humility, integrity, like, can you guys share any changes that we've made to the program or our therapy style or our coaching style that we've done due to complaints? Because I think it's unrealistic to say that we're always doing everything right, and there have not been legit complaints over the years. There any that y'all want to share or to come to mind?
One.
Okay.
I got one, and there's so many. I got way more than one, but for the one that's been the most impactful for me was pretty early on in the first maybe year or two. We do process group on Sunday at the Sober Living, and I would open it up to them to give me feedback, which I also think was a good thing. So, and sometimes it's like just goofy stuff. You just got to figure out the discernment. But they said, we feel like you give us you like only focus on the negative stuff and you don't ever give us compliments for the positive stuff we're doing. And while I could totally justify, and I did in that instance of like, well, hey, like the positive stuff's all good. Like I don't want to focus on that. I just want to focus on the negative stuff only to make you better. But then after reflecting on it was like, that would suck to just have a guy only pointing out the negative stuff. And like, I have got to be better about highlighting the positives and the wins and like really building them up in those areas to counteract, you know, probably 2 positive things for every 1 negative thing that I'm focusing on that they need to improve with. So that came from one specific guy that I worked with, and really changed my outlook in a good way that I still carry to this day as far as how I talk to guys.
Yeah. I'll go. I have one. And it's kind of like in a broad category. I've just heard this from like multiple people or families over the years. And it's just, it goes under the category of like communication style, like making sure I'm being like above board and like, maybe not even above board, but like just overly transparent with my communication, you know, really explaining things out. That's for like the parent side of it. And I think it makes sense, like tend to be like a loss of control, more anxiety, really like being what I would call like almost overly communicative, but understanding like I need to improve my communication, communicate more. And then with the guys, like less like hostile communication compared to early on in my career would be more like confrontational, but like, you know, more like intense with my communication with them. And I realized like due to conversations with them or like reflecting on it, like that could hurt rapport. So trying to find that balance of like still holding people to the line, but not doing it in such an emotional confrontation type of way that can hurt rapport and drive like a big wedge. So that's like a change that I made like within myself with like how I try to help people. How about you, Dave? You got anything?
Gosh, I'm like kind of overwhelmed with all of the changes that have taken place from where we started.
Yeah.
You know, 7, 8 years ago, of like how our orientation packet has changed, which the guys get, and that's what they sign upon entering the sober living program, to how much the policies and procedures have changed, which is more of what staff and we focus on as like rules and regulations that we abide by. It's tough to pick just one. I was trying to think of something more like programmatic or like towards the staff side of things versus, you know, house rules or regulations that have changed. I kind of land on a communication one as well, but communication amongst staff and like, and Cole, you kind of played into this too, of like better communication with other therapists or with other staff, or like calling something out in the moment versus like letting it linger for too long. I don't know. Gosh, I feel like I should be coming up with something better than that.
No, I think you have some points on that. I mean, like from the time GT was started, like you think about the increase in like treatment team meetings, to actually having a clinical office to keep things more in-house and like make the communication better. I mean, that's like a pretty big change that happened like 5 years ago. Trying to like incorporate like different things in like different activities, or hey, you guys want to focus more on this, or we think this would be helpful, what do you think? Like let's learn about relationships and attachment style. Okay, yeah, that sounds like it'd be helpful, let's do that. We like to get a little more like activity and stuff. Hey, let's go take a walk during group, you know, like so trying to hear the complaints and like also just think about it from a human standpoint of like what would be helpful for me if I was sitting on the couch, you know, what would help me. So
yeah,
I think
even to have the ability to do that, because when we started this, we were outsourcing all clinical. It was like not everything was under the same roof, so it was so hard to like connect all of the dots. And now I think, you know, we listened to a lot of feedback over the years and gaps, or saw where there were gaps in the program, and we were able to make some big changes there.
Something I would say is that I'm really proud of, and I'm sure y'all are too, is that while GT, you know, the sober living started out with like David and I coming up with rules and structure and programs in the office, way more on your side, Cole, coming up with like structure and rules and program, and David and I help them with that. I would say today there are as many like remnants and marks from past staff that's not even with us, past clients on the sober living and the office side. Like they have as many marks on this program as far as rules and programs and stuff like that as we did initially, where like someone could be like, you know, why do we do these phase up sheets on the house side when we go up phases? And I'm like, because a coach came up with that. I didn't come up with that. You know, even along the way or in the beginning, a coach was like, hey, I think this would be a really cool thing for them to do in between phases. And that coach isn't with us, but we still do that because it was a really good idea. And I've had guys come up with stuff where they just kind of look at some system and they're like, wouldn't this work better this way? And it's like, at first, of course, I'm like, no, it would never. It has to be the way I said it to be.
Yeah, for sure.
But always when I can take that second to be like, no, that does make a lot of sense. And that came from this guy and he just saw it in a different angle that I didn't. So I'm really proud that like GT is as much those past clients program and that past staff program and current staff program as it feels like it's our program.
That's beautifully said. I love that. David, clip that on Instagram.
Flipping it, making it a short.
There you
All
go.
right.
Flip it, flip it, rip it,
Well, that's it.
dip it.
All right.